And good to have you with us on a Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks so much for starting your week with us. We are going to begin this hour with the latest on that deadly attack in Vancouver. At least 11 people are dead and dozens were injured after a car drove straight into a crowd at a block party celebrating Filipino culture Saturday.
A 30-year-old man has been charged with multiple counts of murder. Police say he drove at high speed into a crowd. Once the SUV came to a halt, the driver was captured by bystanders and turned over to police. NBC News correspondent Maya Eaglin joins us now with the very latest on this story. Good to have you with us. So just walk us through more about what happened and how the community is responding.
Yeah, last night, actually, the community gathered for a vigil to remember the 11 victims who died in this accident. It happened Saturday, 8 p.m. local time in Vancouver. Authorities say an SUV plowed through this really busy street. It was a Filipino cultural festival called Lapu-Lapu Day. Lapu-Lapu was an indigenous leader that many people in the Filipino community consider a national hero for kind of fighting against colonizers there. So this was a pedestrian-only streetway for this festival. It was completely closed off to traffic. There were food trucks on both sides. It was a really chaotic scene. Let's take a listen to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and his thoughts as this tragedy unfolded.
Families lost a sister, a brother, a mother, a father, a son, or a daughter. Those families are living every family's nightmare. And to them and to the many others who were injured, to the Filipino-Canadian community, and to everyone in the broader Lower Mainland, Vancouver, I would like to offer my deepest condolences and my wishes for strength and compassion in this tragic time.
Yeah, so 11 people died, dozens injured, and police say those numbers could continue growing with the severity of the injuries we're dealing with here.
As we just mentioned, police have a suspect in custody. What do we know at this point, and any word on motive? Is it terrorism? Are authorities believing that?
Yeah, so they were able to identify 30-year-old Kai G. Adam. He's being charged with 8 counts of second-degree murder. Police are saying he acted alone, but that this is not an act of terrorism. They say that it was not politically, racially motivated. And they've alluded to it being more of a mental health related incident here. They say that they've had several incidences involving this suspect several times and that he acted alone. And yeah, as you mentioned, Savannah, the crowd actually detained him first before police got to him.
You mentioned this pedestrian walkway was totally closed off. Obviously, something went wrong here. Are city officials in Vancouver saying they're going to make changes for similar events moving forward?
So they say that they stand by their security risk assessment here. They say before every festival, before protest, that they kind of scan social media. They address the situation. And this is what they're describing as kind of an unpredictable one-off, really extreme tragedy that they could not have predicted. Going forward, they say they're going to review the plan that they had in the risk assessment. And if anything could have been done to prevent this, maybe change their plans moving forward.
All right. Maya Eaglin. Maya, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maya. Well, an investigation is underway this morning into a deadly boat crash that happened overnight off Florida's west coast. Authorities are calling the incident a hit and run. According to the city of Clearwater, a ferry carrying 45 people was struck by a boat which then fled. At least one passenger died and a number of others were injured, some seriously. The city said that the fleeing boat has been identified and that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission will take the lead on the investigation with help from the U.S. Coast Guard.
President Trump is calling on Russia to stop its attacks on Ukraine. He spoke a day after his meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky on the sidelines of the Pope's funeral, saying he was disappointed by Russia's recent missile attacks. The U.S. is trying to revive peace talks between both countries, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker the U.S. could abandon its efforts to broker a deal if progress is not made.
President Trump is about to mark his 100th day in office. It comes as a key campaign promise is to end the war in Ukraine, and against the backdrop of that extraordinary meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. Mr. Secretary, is Russia and Ukraine now closer to a deal in the wake of that meeting?
Well, I think they're closer in general than they've been any time in the last 3 years, but it's still not there. And as I said, and he has said, and others have said, he's done an extraordinary job. At the highest levels of our government, the president has put out everybody you can imagine, Ambassador Witkoff, myself, the National Security Advisor, the Vice President, been involved and engaged in this effort to bring the two sides closer so we can have path to peace. By the way, that's something that should be celebrated. He's trying to end a 3-year war that has no military solution, where every day people are dying, especially on the Ukrainian side, in many cases civilians and children, as we've seen the images over the last few weeks. He's trying to bring this war to an end, and we've made real progress. But those last couple steps of this journey were always going to be the hardest ones, and it needs to happen soon. We cannot continue, as I said, to dedicate time and resources to this effort if it's not going to come to fruition. So the last week has really been about figuring out how close are these sides really, and are they close enough that this merits a continued investment of our time as a mediator in this regard.
What is the timeline? Are you talking weeks or months? How long are you willing to give them to reach a peace agreement?
Well, I always think it's silly to set a specific date or whatever, but I can just tell you that almost 100 days into this presidency, the president has dedicated a tremendous amount of time and energy to this. And we think we brought the sides closer than they've been in a very long time, but we're not there yet, and it needs to start happening. We need to start, I think this is going to be a very critical week. This week is going to be a really important week in which we have to make a determination about whether this is an endeavor that we want to continue to be involved in, or if it's time to sort of focus on some other issues that are equally, if not more important in some cases. But we want to see it happen. There are reasons to be optimistic, but there are reasons to be realistic, of course, as well. We're close, but we're not close enough.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at MeetThePress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
All right, Kristen, thank you so much.
NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now for more on this. Hey, Raf, good morning. So tell us a bit more about that meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. What came of it, and where do things stand right now on these peace efforts?
Guys, good morning. This was the first encounter between the two presidents since their disastrous meeting in the Oval Office back in February. Viewers will remember President Trump berating Zelensky. You can see this was a very different tone in that dramatic setting in the Vatican. The two presidents one-on-one, sitting basically knee to knee in those red chairs under that grand dome. And it seems like this was a meeting that went much more smoothly. President Trump emerged from it saying he was frustrated with Russia, with Vladimir Putin, and talking potentially about imposing new sanctions on Russia if they don't come to the negotiating table in good faith. I want you to take a listen to a little bit of what he had to say.
I think the meeting went well. We'll see what happens over the next few days. We'll probably learn a lot. He told me that he needs more weapons, but he's been saying that for 3 years, He needs more weapons, and we're going to see what happens. I want to see what happens with respect to Russia, because Russia had been surprised and disappointed, very disappointed that they did the bombing of those places after discussions.
Now, the Ukrainians will certainly welcome that shift in tone from President Trump. He's talking about Vladimir Putin bombing Ukrainian cities, not being a good faith negotiator here. But the reality is the two sides are still very, very far apart. President Trump saying he thinks the Ukrainians are prepared to give up Crimea as part of these negotiations. The Ukrainians are saying that is an absolute non-starter. And the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, today basically repeating the same set of demands that Vladimir Putin laid out when he launched this invasion back in February 2022, including that the world recognize Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. Guys.
Ralph, let's talk about what's happening on the ground right now, especially in the Kursk region. Over the weekend, Russia said that the region was retaken from Ukraine. Seems like Kyiv doesn't really agree with that assessment. What's going on here?
Yeah, Joe, viewers will remember Kursk is that border region of Russia that Ukrainian forces burst into in that surprise offensive last year. The idea was to distract Russian troops from their fighting in the east of Ukraine, and this was potentially also a bargaining chip. But we have seen Russian forces slowly but surely grinding down the Ukrainians. Russia is now saying it has fully retaken the Kursk region. Ukraine is saying that isn't true. Whatever the exact reality on the ground is, it is clear that Ukrainian forces have been losing their footholds there. This has not turned out to be the kind of game changer that President Zelensky was hoping for. It is notable, guys, that for the first time over the weekend, we heard both Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un of North Korea acknowledging that North Koreans actually fought inside Russia as part of this battle. That is something that we have known for a long time, but it has also been something that both the Kremlin and Pyongyang have been reluctant to acknowledge in public. Guys.
Ralph, also, we're getting new details on that car bombing in Russia. We told our viewers about this. This was last week that killed a Russian general. Russian authorities say he was paid by Ukraine's security service. What are we learning, and how has Kyiv responded?
Yeah, so the Russians are saying that they now have a suspect in custody. You can see him being dragged into a Russian courtroom there. They are alleging that he was an agent of the Ukrainian intelligence services. Ukraine so far is not acknowledging that one way or another. We do know that Ukraine has carried out various assassinations, sabotage operations inside of Russia. So it is possible, given that the target here was a high-profile Russian general, it is possible that this was the work of Ukraine. This car bombing happened on Friday, and it's notable it happened on the same day that U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff was meeting Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Guys.
All right, Ralph Sanchez, thank you very much.
Tomorrow will mark 100 days since President Donald Trump took office for his second term. Now, it's traditionally a time to measure and assess what has been done versus what was promised during the campaign. New polling is now revealing Mr. Trump has one of the worst approval ratings for a newly elected president approaching this milestone in decades.
According to a new NBC News Stay Tuned poll powered by SurveyMonkey, 55% of Americans disapprove of the way Mr. Trump is handling his job. And even when you look deeper at these attitudes towards his policies, Mr. Trump failed to win majority support on any of the specific issues that were asked about in this survey.
Here with us now for more is NBC News Stay Tuned correspondent Marquise Francis. Good to have you with us. So 55% disapproval, that's really in line with a lot of the polling we're seeing now 100 days in. Break in some of the feelings people have about Mr. Trump's performance, including areas where he's shown strength often in the past.
Yeah, Joe, when I took a look at this poll, what came to mind is there's levels to this, as young people may say, right? When you look at that 55% disapproval number and really break it down, I want to pull up a full screen that shows 42% of Americans strongly disapprove, and just 1 in 4. 26% of Americans actually strongly approve of Trump. And then when you break it down to Gen Z, for Gen Z, our youngest voting age demo, 18 to 29, 66% of them disapprove in some capacity, compared to 14% strongly approve. And so we know across demos from this poll, respondents show that their top 3 issues are the economy, threats to democracy, and of course, healthcare. 3 things the Trump administration have been doing a lot of things on, but in what direction, it's up for interpretation.
In that poll, tariffs, it was something that we asked about because obviously it's been something that we've been talking about a lot. And that really did earn Trump's lowest rating there. There is also, though, a big difference in the responses of young men and young women. There's just a little preview of that on the screen. What did this find when it comes to a gender divide? Yeah,
I mean, when it comes to the gender divide, we know that his approval numbers are even wider with men amongst women, men actually approving of Trump at a larger clip than women. When we look at Gen X, 56% of men for Gen X approve of Trump compared to 43% of women. But Gen Z, 45% of Gen Z men approve of Trump and just 24% of women. That's a 21-point difference, and I think it's very telling, and it could be indicative of the future of what the future elections, midterms could really look like.
We mentioned these are some of the worst numbers we've seen for a president 100 days in. Give us a little bit of a history lesson here. How does this compare with recent past presidents?
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned at the top, these are the worst approval ratings in decades, and going back all the way to Dwight Eisenhower in 1950. But even most recently, you can look on the screen and see Trump the first time, or at least the first time around in 2017, Trump's approval rating was 41%. And his disapproval rating was 54%. Barack Obama was at 62%. His disapproval rating was at 29%. And even Joe Biden on the screen, 57% approval rating and 40% disapproval. So those numbers just go to show presidents in the past have been a little more popular than Trump is right now.
All right. Marquise, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good to have you with us. Well, that poll also found that the president's immigration policy has the broadest support among respondents, but he is still underwater there. The numbers show a divided public, with 49% of adults approving of his handling of border security and immigration, while 51% disapprove.
One of the newest fights over immigration is playing out in Wisconsin right now. Over the weekend, people there rallied in support of a Milwaukee County Circuit judge. She was arrested by the FBI on Friday for allegedly helping an undocumented immigrant avoid arrest. She's now facing federal charges. Speaking to reporters yesterday, President Trump said he hoped the Supreme Court would weigh in on the issue.
What happened there is terrible. That could happen with a judge is so ashamed. Look, we have to bring our country back from all these criminals that Biden allowed to come in. These are world-class criminals. We can't let these people stay, and the courts are allowing them to stay. We're just not going to allow it. So hopefully the Supreme Court will come to the rescue of our country.
For more on all this, let's bring in NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley and our legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Good morning to both of you. Julia, I'll start with you just to tell us more about this judge and what she's accused of doing, what she's been charged with.
So this is Judge Hannah Dugan. What she's been charged with is federally obstructing federal authorities who were trying to arrest this man. This is someone who DHS says has been charged not only with being in the country illegally, but with other crimes as well, and that they're saying that she allowed him to leave her courtroom in a way that authorities would not be able to interfere to arrest him. And this is coming after we've seen numerous arrests inside court, something that wasn't as common before. In fact, at least in immigration courts, ICE agents used to usually stand outside so that people felt like they could actually come to their court hearings, so they didn't arrest them at that space. This is in federal court, though, and we've seen more and more presence, an increased presence of ICE agents. What DHS is saying is that she basically obstructed authorities by directing him away and that he should have been arrested. And so in this case, they're calling her an activist judge, and you've heard Trump call there saying that he thinks the Supreme Court needs to weigh in on this.
So, Danny, this is not the first time that a judge has been charged with helping someone evade immigration agents. There was a similar case actually brought during the first Trump administration. We heard the president there say a moment ago he hopes the Supreme Court could weigh in. That's not the next step in this, though things have been getting to the court a lot faster. But what exactly does he hope that the court could sort out here?
Who knows? The Supreme Court is not likely to weigh in on this case. And that precedent, when the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, similarly prosecuted a state court judge for almost really very similar facts, shows that the government can prosecute judges for these crimes. I don't believe it's a good idea, but at the same time, given that there's this precedent out there, and by the way, the judge that was charged before in Massachusetts, that case went on for years. The Biden administration didn't dismiss it right away. It wasn't until about 2022, and the judge got what's called pretrial diversion. That's sort of an exoneration, but not really an exoneration, and it really derailed her career. So judges were on notice. So while I don't think the government handled this well, probably wasn't a great idea for this judge to get involved, knowing this administration is going to prosecute. Now, I think it's a defensible case. I think the judge could argue, if she wanted to go to trial, and she likely would not want to go to trial, that, hey, she was trying to avoid violence in the courtroom hallways, and if you want to arrest him out in the parking lot, that's fine. Is it a winning defense? Not entirely sure. But I think it's problematic on both sides here. Administration shouldn't be targeting judges, but at the same time, state court judges know what this administration does, and they should beware.
Julia, tell us more about how we've been seeing immigration authorities really ramp up their operations directed at migrants.
Yeah, there was a pretty striking one just over the weekend in Colorado Springs, Savannah, where the DEA, and also they were assisted by ICE and local authorities as well, arrested over 100 people, undocumented immigrants that they allege, inside an underground nightclub in Colorado Springs. This is part of what we heard we would be seeing more of, actually, having an all-of-government approach, bringing in tons of different law enforcement agencies to do raids like this. But actually, this has been less common than we thought. Instead, we've seen fewer arrests, and those who are arrested oftentimes are released because they don't have the capacity. This really is the shock and awe that they advertised in the beginning. And so we'll see if this continues to ramp up. Of course, doing anything like that takes a lot of investigative work and a lot of time, a lot of manpower. So we'll see if they're able to continue that. Another thing I wanted to point you to, Savannah, is a case that the Justice or the Department of Homeland Security is saying where a woman chose to take her 2-year-old with her when she was deported to Honduras. But a judge in that case is saying that she was not able to reach the mother to make sure that the mother approved. This is a 2-year-old who is a U.S. citizen in the United States. And DHS is saying, look, the mother chose to take the child with her rather than be separated. That happens all the time. And that is true. Parents oftentimes are stuck with this difficult decision of either bringing their child back to the country from which they fled or remaining separated allowing the child to stay with a guardian or relative here in the United States. But in this case, the judge said that they could not reach the mother to get that confirmation and that 2-year-old was not given the due process that she deserved.
That's the case, Danny, I want to ask you more about there. The federal judge overseeing the Louisiana case was actually appointed by President Trump back in 2017. So he's now ordered a hearing for next month. He says, quote, in the interest of dispelling our strong suspicion that the government just deported a U.S. citizen with no meaningful process. So the Department of Homeland Security says this girl's mother made the decision to take the child with her to Honduras. In your view, is that going to satisfy the court, or is the process not being followed here?
Yeah, first and foremost, you cannot remove a U.S. citizen. But as Julia pointed out correctly, what often does happen is that minor children whose parents are here illegally often make the parental choice to take the child with them if they are removed. And that is lawful. And the child can return at any time in the future. And in fact, the parents can even, I believe, petition, even if they're not here lawfully, to bring the child back as a U.S. citizen to essentially drop them off. But here's the thing. When you file a habeas petition, and that's what this is, the court typically assumes everything in it is true for the moment. The court may just have a hearing and determine that the child was not deported, but taken with the mother. And you can read that throughout the order. There's language like, we don't know for sure what happened. That's what the hearing is for. So the net end result may end up being exactly the same.
All right, Danny Savalos, Julia Ainsley, thank you both very much.
The threat of severe weather is ramping up for millions of Americans this morning, and this follows a weekend of deadly flooding, tornadoes, and hail, which left parts of the country battered. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broadus reports on the damage.
Rising floodwater in Oklahoma threatening homes and sweeping cars off the road. Record rainfall forcing rescues. First responders using boats to bring neighbors to safety as officials urge some residents to evacuate. From above, you can see the creek spilling over to nearby fields.
We've got sheriff's deputies going house to house in areas that are flood prone where people are living and trying to do evacuations.
In Lawton, more than 5 inches of rain fell on Saturday, setting a daily record.
My neighbor's car was floating down the river.
Police say one person was killed after their car was submerged.
All right, pull over now.
Meanwhile, in southeast New Mexico, storms spawning 2 confirmed tornadoes. Damaging hail, battering windshields and homes.
We lost our basketball goal. Look at the front of our house.
In Pennsylvania, a cold front fueling strong wind gusts as firefighters work to contain 2 wildfires. And the threat isn't over. Millions in the path for damaging wind, hail, and tornadoes. The severe weather risk ramping up with 36 million on alert from Texas to Michigan. Adrian Broadus, NBC News.
Now let's get a closer look at which parts of the country are at risk today in our Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Violetta Yaz is tracking the severe weather for us. Good morning, Violetta.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, unfortunately, we're in store for another active day. We're really in the thick of severe weather season. Right now, quick look at the radar showing some strong storms still moving across parts of Minnesota. Nothing severe at the moment, but plenty of heavy rain and frequent lightning. These are the thunderstorms that weakened overnight, but we're expecting another round to develop later today, in particular here with multiple corridors of severe weather possible. So we'll see that great chance late afternoon and evening. Once those conditions become favorable, we get the daytime heating going and the atmosphere just becomes ripe for these damaging thunderstorms. So this is the potential for a severe storm outbreak, as probability is rather high. We're seeing those main risks: damaging winds in excess of 60 miles per hour, large hail, and the potential for tornadoes. Tornadoes, in fact, actually likely, in particular in this corridor here along I-35. From right around Kansas City up through Des Moines, approaching Minneapolis, and that's going to be one of those areas where the tornadoes are going to be most likely. Now, those tornadoes become particularly dangerous, or even more dangerous, I should say, when they develop after dark. So folks living in this part of the country need to make sure they have a plan in place if those warnings should start to be issued later this evening, along with those thunderstorms. Now, by tomorrow, the front is going to start to sag south and east. So we'll see some strong to severe thunderstorms across interior sections of New England and stretching into parts of Texas as well. I'm not thinking we'll see quite the same intensity. Nonetheless, still seeing that potential for some locally damaging storms. The tornado threat in this case is going to be lower. We'll get some damaging winds, and the hail threat actually a little bit more elevated in these areas for tomorrow. You can see interior sections of New York State through Pennsylvania and stretching down into parts of Texas as well. By Wednesday, we'll see another low track into east central Texas. And again, another threat for severe weather. Just cannot get a break in this part of the country near the Dallas, Fort Worth area, extending northward through parts of Arkansas. So again, the severe threat is going to stick with us the next couple of days. By tomorrow, 46 million at risk, damaging winds, hail, and an isolated tornado possible. But in terms of those frequent and really impactful, long-lasting tornadoes, I think today, unfortunately, is going to be the day for that. And folks really need to be prepared in the middle of the country.
All right. It's that time of year. Violetta, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.